I'm very excited to introduce Maria Brunner, one of the founders of the Entertainment Management Program and a great friend of this program over the years. Many of our students who have found success out in the industry interned with Maria, and some of them are in this room right now, so that's pretty cool. So I'll turn it over to Maria Brunner. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, how many of you have I taught with before? Raise your hand. Okay, so I think we're very fortunate to have the people that have come up to put on the Montana Music Summit, and I urge you to find ways to network, etc. So, Alanya, hello. So we're going to move this along at kind of a brisk pace because we think it's a really popular topic, but we want to leave time for you. I know we asked this before, but they were here to see this. How many of you are performers or artists or want to be? So we're glad you're here. So this is about the world of the independent artist and the independent world. I had music pulled up by the Zombies and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which just announced their new quote-unquote nominees. Having been through that process of getting someone in to be inducted, great learning experience, hope you never have to do it again. And with that said, there are 4 independent artists on this roster, which I think is a very telling thing, and you're listening to one of them. So you can figure out on your own who else is independent. So what I'd like to do is we have 4 amazing people here. They're each going to do a brief introduction, and then we're going to talk about 2 to 3 topics, and then it's for you. It's all about you and talking with them. Take it away.
All right. So I basically, I'll make it real brief. Maybe you can ask questions about me later, but I take music from independent artists, from major labels, from indie labels, from
Can you
major
hear
publishers. No. Okay, so I take music from independent artists, major labels, indie labels, major publishers, independent publishers.
I don't know how it works.
And I pitch it across film, TV, video games, ad agencies, trailers through my own company. I also have a deal with Cobalt to do distribution for a few artists that I represent, but with masters in publishing too.
Hi, Victoria Camera. I currently, I'm the vice president of, is there really a microphone?
Yes.
I am the,
Vikings, those are just for the camera. Please put them back where they
Sure. Nobody told
all
us.
right, let me know if you can't hear me. I'm the vice president of music strategy and artist relations for Reverb Nation. We are home to independent and emerging artists. To date, we probably have around 5 million globally that use the platform in different capacities. So everything from, essentially building your career from the ground up before you would get the support of a booking agent or a manager or a record label. So everything from digital distribution to Facebook advertising to what my team oversees is the opportunity side of the business. So finding valuable opportunities for independent artists, everything from festivals to brand partnerships to radio opportunities and that kind of stuff.
Austin.
Hi, my name's Austin Mullins. I'm a booking agent at WME in our Nashville office. Also a former student here, so actually see some of my classmates from back in the day in here. Plenty of professors, so it's cool to be home. As a booking agent, I'm responsible for booking our clients in clubs in the Southeast Territory, which is Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas, and clubs that are generally in the capacity level of about 150 to 1,000 cap. And as a full-line talent agency, we also negotiate deals for our talent across other platforms, such as branding, sponsorship, television, movies, literature, and so forth. So although I work specifically in the music side, we're a company that wants to promote an artist through all media types within their brand.
Joe.
My name is Joe Anderson, and I have sort of a divided path. At at some point, we developed a word to describe people like me, and we came up with ambicognitive. So it's like ambidextrous, only inside your head. I think there are other clinical terms for it, but I spent most of my career as an entertainment attorney. I started off in the music business. I was in San Francisco when Napster lit the fuse on the dot-com boom, so I became an entrepreneurial music attorney, which wound up then making me a digital media attorney. I ran a record label in the 90s, moved to Los Angeles in 2000, added film to the repertoire, became a film producer as well as then video on demand, had finally caught up to where it was supposed to be in the digital media world. Ultimately left to write a novel and got involved in an educational technology company. And then I moved back to Montana, thinking I would learn some oil and gas and water law, and instead found this marvelous institution and your neighbor across the street, the Blackstone Launchpad, and found out that there was a whole new second career for me here. So I continue to practice sort of entrepreneurial digital media law and entertainment law, but I also run a company called Reflex Protect, which makes it's a safety company that has developed a non-lethal alternative to violence so that you don't either have nothing or a handgun as your two choices. And so that's a company that we built really from day one in the Blackstone Launchpad, and now we're housed over at Montech. So I'm local. So if after all of this is over, there's somebody that you need to complain to, it's probably going to be me.
I think also, just before we launch into this, I think I'm going to volunteer the three of them. I'm sure they'll be available in one form or another to connect and talk with you either over this weekend or after they leave. So leave the responsibility up to you guys to reach out to them, come see them after this, and also tomorrow as well. So when we were talking about independent artists, and Austin and I talked about this because I come from Scottsdale, and there's a band called Jared and the Mill, and at one point they were up here. And they played at the Top Hat during one of the worst blizzards I've been in a long time in Montana. And they were, at that time, had a couple of record labels swirling around them and had some opportunities, but one of their parents sat down with them and said, let's really look at these options and what you want to do. Because it's great that you can sell records and you have lots of fans, but can you make a living? What are your revenue streams that you can tap into? Can you do it successfully? How do you do it successfully so that you can actualize what it is you want to do as a band? What do you see as revenue streams for independent artists? We'll just make it a free-for-all with you all.
Booking.
Touring.
Touring has become, we joke in our office that we have sometimes gone from being an artistic touring and booking agency to an employment agency. You know, the writing on the wall of the downfall of the record industry has been, for a while. And although there are certain genres like country music that I work in where it is still necessary by a great deal to be, an arena type act. Although it was writing on the wall that it was decreasing, people weren't buying records, people have to find out where they can make some money to continue their project and earn a living. And so the need for touring has increased. Since my time at a booking agency, which has been 8 years now, we have seen year over year over year gross revenue from touring increase, the number of dates increase, and the number of arena acts increase all at the same time. And so, to use your word, it almost kind of has become a free-for-all in a way. And what has come of that is agencies now signing artists at a much earlier state than what they used to. It wasn't too long ago that you didn't sign an artist until they had a record deal and they had backing by a financial institution, which is what a record label is. You know, call a record label, you can call it a record label, but it is just a marketing company by and large. They're willing to invest a lot of times the number around $1 million to market you, to put you out into the ether and hope something sticks. And whether or not that works or not, the artist still has a tendency to want to tour, to make money, and the label also wants them to tour to recoup funds from the record deal. And so we've had a challenge in our world of having to teach artists how to tour smarter rather than harder, because artists have seen other artists break on the road, and that's how they broke. And you know, it's been a learning curve in the last decade to find out how, yes, they might have broke on the road, so to speak, but a lot of times there was some sort of funding behind them. If it
But
was
you
a
know,
record label.
Austin, we're talking about an indie band
Mm-hmm.
or an indie group where that record label isn't there for that support.
Exactly, exactly. And so, like I said, signing at an earlier stage has had to train people, A, how to listen better, I think, and
to
also develop, understand, you know, taking classes, if you will, in the School of Hard Knocks of social media and what does that mean for an artist. You know, if an artist has 1 million followers, does that mean they have fans or just followers? And so it's become a complex issue for us, for sure.
Well, I find that, and we had a conversation last night with Riddell and a few other people, that, you know, you may be signed to a major label or you may be independent, but you need to tour if you're going to be an artist. And I always tell people you start regionally. You don't, or now we have data that says, okay, you have, let's say you're up on YouTube and you don't have a digital distribution deal, or you do, you're up on Spotify and iTunes, you can track and see where people are listening.
So you develop your bases.
You find your base, and you need to break out of that base. Where before, 10 years ago, you couldn't do that. You don't know who's listening, where they're listening. You're just hoping you're like labels would throw money at media and marketing and all these things, hoping that they see something. Now you can say, okay, I do well here in Montana, but I'm doing really well in Alabama and Boston. Weird. Okay. Then you go on your social media and you figure out who there is going to champion you, just like you would at a label or at a publisher or with your management company. Who's that one person that is really on board? You need to find that super fan, or yourself. You need to get out with your social media and go, how do I find a place to go play there and bring enough people that makes sense for me to travel to that spot and build out of that region? But you have to tour. I have an artist I'm working with right now, and she's calling out saying, nothing's happening. And I'm based on sync. So labels and publishers and independent artists come to me and they go, I need a sync. And I've heard this, I've been doing this since 2003. I can give you my whole rundown.
Does
It's just too
everybody know
long.
what that means? I need a sync?
So it's basically, so what I do is, it's a sync is putting a song, whether you own the master, I represent the master of the publishing, into a film, TV, video game, ad, or a trailer for a film. So usually when that happens, and when I was at Capitol, I put a song into a Honda ad, and it was, help me out.
Empire of the Sun.
Empire of the Sun. So it was a 6-year-old song that
It's a
went
great
to a
case
Honda
study.
ad. It ran its radio 7 years ago. It went into the ad, the Honda ad. It blew up immediately. Steve Barnett is like, we're going from 6,000 downloads to 30,000 downloads in a day. What are we going to do to back this up? It took a minute for the whole system to start moving, and he finally goes, you guys, we're going back to radio. And they say, this song is 7 years old. I don't care. Go to top 40, go to radio. It went number one for the first time they created their first number one.
And
So
it was how old?
6, 7 years old.
Yeah, that's
So, I mean, and this is an anomaly, okay? But a lot of artists come to me and they go, in labels, and for years, since 2003, we need you to get this because radio they need a talking point. They can't go to radio without something to back it up, and publicity wasn't working, and marketing wasn't working. So, I'm gonna try and back it up, but trying to get something where there's some momentum. So I have an artist saying, there's nothing going on. Well, I have a song coming up, and then up next, Daredevil TV show. It's gonna probably air in December or January. I don't have a set date. Great. Maybe there's something that pops out of it. Maybe they see a bump in their Instagram, in their downloads, in their streams. But that's only like just a spark. That I told that artist, I'm like, you need to get on the road and push it yourself. And it's just me, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not her label, I'm not her publisher. I mean, I distribute for her, but I'm like, there's no backing here. You need to go do this yourself. So when that happens and you get a spark, you need to go out and do it. You know, unless you're just a sync band, which means you're just writing music to try and get in film and TV, fine. But if nothing's happening, go ahead.
I have a question actually about this. I don't know if this is the right time for this or not, but we've seen kind of what happened with television and movies when Netflix came around, and then we have data on usage and how they're watching, when they're stopping, and what they're getting into. So, at what point are artists are they taking data from Spotify, from Apple Music, finding out like the length of song or what type of song or BPMs or this stuff? Is this influencing back into how artists are being managed? Are they being told to change? Are they taking this information and changing themselves to try to like fit into that? Or is music still the one where people are trying to be outside of that and get discovered and create a new sound? Does that make sense?
It depends. There's a lot of artists, and I'm terrible with names. There's one with musician music. Just got signed to Republic, rock band. So they started. There's some artists that's what they do. They write songs for sync or Big Data. Here's a perfect example, right? I mean, he was working at a music house or something like that, and he wrote for film and TV. He wrote the song, created an artist mantra, or an artist persona, and then did 1 million records. You know what I mean? So it depends on what you want to do. If you're an artist, you want to keep to your craft, and you have a genre and you're in it, I would never ask you to change, or I would hope anyone else would ask you to change. Go, well, let's put some lyrics in there that are going to respond to telephone companies. Like, if you're going to do that, then write specifically for film or TV or video games or trailers.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, I think it's a very exciting time to be an artist today. I think the power has definitely shifted back to the artist, when back in the day it was all about the record label. But that's why now it's so important that you guys can maintain your intellectual property as long as you can, because of mainly reasons like streaming, Spotify, Amazon, and how you can make money there, or licensing opportunities. I mean, like I said, I work with all independent bands, and we've gotten some major placements for them, and these are indie bands. We've gotten, placements in $100 million Warner Brothers picture film. We've gotten Nashville, Empire. So there's, the playing field's definitely been a little leveled here. And also on the touring side, it's like, we work with this indie band called Fly By Midnight. They're out of New York. They're the biggest hustlers I've ever met, in the best way possible. Everything they've secured, from brand partnership deals to touring, they've done on their own. They got a 40 tour date, a college run. They got it through NACA. Do you guys know what NACA is?
It's a college networking situation. It's been around for a long time.
Yeah, right. So essentially, you as an independent artist can go and showcase in front of all of these universities that book acts. And they're not just booking really big acts. I mean, some of them are, but some of them are booking baby bands. So they formed a relationship with that organization. Because of that, they got a 40-day tour out of it. They covered all of their expenses. And from that, they really, honed in on the data. They saw where their fans were, which markets these fans were reacting in, and now they're circling back in January to create a tour solely around that, So it's a great example of how you can really do it on your own and monetize from it. I think they started in 2015. They said they put about $40,000 to $50,000 of their own money into the project. And they've already recouped and made some solely off getting out there and hustling on their own from, you know, licensing and touring. So it definitely can be done.
Joe,
Sure. I think you know what I probably want to say. And it's weird for me to be like the elder statesman now, but I started in the music business when it was still the plastic disc selling business. And the first .com company I incorporated was called IUMA, the Internet Underground Music Archive, and it was the first company to release music on the internet. And they did so after talking to me, and as a result did not infringe anybody's copyrights, as opposed to Napster, who infringed everybody's copyrights and made billions of dollars. But both of those companies had the same mission, which was to upend the music industry. And the reason that came to be was it was a filthy business in which they advanced you some money, you made a record for them, they owned the record as if they had made it themselves as a work made for hire. The money they advanced you was spent on the recording by and large, and you were probably young and dumb and blew the rest of it fairly quickly. And then you got your royalty, which first repaid all of the money that they had spent before you saw any of it. And by the way, before you saw any of it, you either were unsuccessful and done, or you were successful and they issued you another advance to make another record, and then you learned the meaning of the phrase cross-collateralization. And no one could make money unless you were absolutely huge. But that was the only game in town. And that's what the young internet Turks saw as the target, as the thing to upend. Well, I never represented a record label in my life. I only represented independent artists. Or that's not really true. I also represented a lot of old artists, like the Jefferson Airplane or Quicksilver Messenger Service or the Dead or Santana, in other matters, long after their careers were over. So long after touring was no longer part of what they were doing. Long after making new records was no longer part of what they were doing, where it was placement of songs and in syncs and movies or things like that, television. So it is, Victoria's right, it is a great time to be in the music business again, or now, because it is about music. It's about the music business. And there are limitless ways to make money. You can just sit in your own home studio now and make music for video games. Or decide you're going to make, the jingle houses aren't even jingle houses anymore. I mean, you can make music for whatever particular purpose you want. What is it, AFM? That has APM, thank you, that's right. APM has this massive library, all these artists, and they contribute to it. And for any time you need just a little needle drop piece of music, you can go on there and search around. It actually takes up about 90% of the time that it takes to make a video that you don't have the music to already, is searching for the music, but you can find anything you want. And some of those people make a living doing that, and don't ever tour. Now, if you're in
so Joe, I'm
yes.
going to interrupt you a second, because one of the questions we were talking about in the hallway, how do you find those sources? How do you know they exist? How do you connect with them? And is that a service you offer?
Sure is.
And does that factor into your employment counseling?
Yeah.
Yes. Often this industry as a whole is very relationship based. And attorneys, agencies, labels, distribution, PROs, we're all talking to each other. And when one particular person in those sectors gets interested in someone, they will call someone that artist is needing. Sometimes it can be very organic, where you just happen to stumble into a club and hear music and get very excited.
Yep.
But yes, even in an agency, we are every Friday frantically looking, like in our office, at Spotify for that new week's Hot Country playlisting. Who are the unsigned artists that are on there that are getting playlisting. How many streams do they have? How many followers do they have? What are their top 5
That goes
markets?
back to your comment about snagging them early
Mhm.
and developing that early.
Yeah.
And that's great news, because the gatekeepers in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s were lawyers. That's how you got a record deal back then, because you actually got an entertainment attorney. Because only 2 kinds of people could get you gigs, lawyers and agents.
Mhm.
That was the law, still is, actually.
A lot of agents have law degrees.
That's, yeah. So, I mean, you went to a lawyer to try to get you a record deal. I can't think of a more stupid system. I didn't have it work for me, but, you know, really, truly.
So Joe, going back to the question of how do you find those sources, I think we've got Victoria here from Reverb Nation that can be a good outsourcing to talk to, including Vince, but how do you find those other situations, games, video games, etc.?
Well, let me go back to a more fundamental thing, which is if you are doing this as a hobby, great. It can be all about the music. But if you want to actually make a living at this, then you got to talk to the other side of the this little area down here over in the Gilkey building. This is the advice I've been giving artists since the 90s. If you're an independent artist, you have to think of yourself as a startup. You should act like a startup business. Yes, it's art. So are lots of things. Independent films, startup business. But music business, if you're going to make a living at it, think of it as a startup business. So if you're in a band, have different people in your band, maybe play certain roles. The answer to the question is, I may know all of those things where you can go, so find somebody to come find me, or somebody to find one of these folks, or somebody to research it on the internet. You know, people with digital DNA now would have already answered your question because they would have Googled it and said, oh, these are how to make money in the music business. Here it is. There's a bunch of sources. So, you know, but you have to actually go about it as if it's a business and set out to say, let's find all the ways we can make money. You know, the days of selling out are long over because they're just, if you're going to make money, it's not going to be the old-fashioned way. Nobody's going to give you $1 million advance or $100,000 advance, eventually going up to $1 million advance if you're really successful. That's just not the way it works anymore.
Joe, I'm going to interrupt you a second because, and we gave you some party favors, as I call them. It's a group called the Accidentals. I don't have a stake in that game. It's just been interesting watching what happens. To what you all had to say, they're from Traverse City, Michigan. I had no idea of what is going on in the state of Michigan from a music standpoint. It's amazing. They make money. They know how to do it. That state, along with Wisconsin, they've got it wired. They know the festivals they've created, 4 songwriting music festivals. It made a revenue all 4 of them, the first year that they did it. This band, these kids were educated at Interlochen. How many of you know what Interlochen is? Okay. They are great gifted writers. They haven't cut a publishing deal. To my knowledge, they were signed to Sony Masterworks. They're now off of that label, and they just are doing the deal. They make money on their merchandise. They tour constantly. They actually called me because I work with a group called Headcount. Is anybody aware of them? Get out the vote. They're always looking to partner with different artists, those artists that will be nonpartisan and really do the deal and work hard with that. So that's probably where we do have a stake in the game, was just putting that partnership together. But that band, and Jared and the Mill, another one that we don't work with, I think they're very symbolic of everything you all have mentioned, and both of those groups are quote-unquote making a living. But the point I also want to make about both of these groups that you guys can talk to, they have gone internal. Who within each group is doing what? In the Accidentals, Katie is that researcher. I think she could sit down with Joe and they could talk for 2 days. I do. She's 20. But she gets it. Sav, we are working with I sit on one of the boards to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They wanted to do a project with young artists with the Cleveland Orchestra, tie in Cleveland University's video department. I sit on the educational board with Jason Handley. So they're one of the groups that are doing that. So one of the Sav that's in the band of the Accidentalists is writing all the orchestra pieces. My gut tells me if I was Austin and had that band, there's something brewing there with that. If this takes off with that one particular concert situation with those entities behind it supporting it, they may have something there. The other guy, the drummer, is the guy that does the business. He would be talking to Joe, he would be talking to Austin, he would be calling you every day. So internally, and the same with Jared and the Mill, and they really have focused on who is doing what. So I leave that premise with you on if you find it successful. Austin, does that help you, not help you? Joe, I think you're somewhat a believer in that, and then how does it work for you?
No, I will give you another example because in my world, more often than not, I'm not dealing with bands. I'm dealing with solo artists who employ a band. And so delegation of everything that you talked about can't just be like, well, you know, us three are the band members and we're splitting it up, because the artist, him or herself, is the brand. And you can't, it's hard to delegate your thing to someone else. It's not that easy sometimes.
So an
And so-
outside team becomes
An
important.
outside team becomes very important, but you still, at the end of the day, it will be the music that is the determining factor on where you go, and your fans, whether that are the people that listen to the music and are out in the crowd that are singing the music back to your fans, or the fans within the industry, need to be louder than you at times. And in the early stages,
Amen.
more often than not, in order to get everybody else to pay attention.
Victoria.
I mean, I've seen it done. You can do it, and I think, you know, there's a lot of bands out there that don't have an outside team, that have to delegate internally. And, you know, treat your band no differently than, you know, I used to work at Atlantic Records for 10 years before coming over to Reverb. So, you know, with Kid Rock or something like that, we always went into these marketing meetings with an 8 to 12 month rollout plan, broken down by everything. I mean, there's a whole strategy, and you guys should treat your brand no differently. I mean, you should have quantifiable, strategic action items that can be broken up by one band member. If you're going on tour, you know, you should be like, well, we would like to sell X amount of merch a night or X amount of ticket sales. And, you know, after you do that tour, go back and reevaluate everything and see if you hit those numbers, or if you didn't, why you didn't, and how to kind of re-strategize on how to get there. So, yeah, I mean, it can be done, and it's a hustle, and honestly, it sucks. So if you ever get to work with somebody like this, it's a blessing, because bands booking their own dates, it's a full-time thing almost, you know, it's super arduous, and but it can be done, it definitely can be
And
done.
I wasn't trying to be negative earlier about touring too early or touring too much, but it just, my point is it needs to be a thoughtful process.
Right.
Calling a booking agent saying I want to play 200 shows a year just isn't
Right.
gonna happen.
Right.
You might know someone that wants to hustle for you, that believes in you, but there needs to be a cohesive plan. And you need to understand yourself more than anything. That's where analytics and data
Right,
come into
right,
place.
right.
If you don't know what your top 20 markets are in the United States, why would you ask anyone to book you more than 5 dates?
Yeah,
you know?
there's a long time of you building everything on your own before you even try to introduce those conversations to people like Austin or a publicist. I mean, I have a contact at a very big advertising agency who he's very passionate about this artist he took on, this singer-songwriter. And she's very green, she's just starting out, she's in Australia, but he is like, I want to get things going. And I had a good friend who just left Atlantic in PR. She started a whole PR firm. And he's like, can you connect me with her? And I was like, yeah, I'll connect you. And she was like, it's too early. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna take you on, you know, save your money, build your fan base, come back to me when you have some kind of angle, a story, you can tell me numbers, you know, so that stuff, you can definitely go into early, so.
And it comes back to building out regionally. If you're in this town, go out and play coffee shops. When I was doing A&R for Columbia and MCA Records from 99 to 03. And I would walk in, and I look young as it is, but when I was 21 to 24, they're like, who's this high school kid going in here? And, you know, I was going to like the Roxy and the Whiskey and the Gig, which is no longer there, and these, you know, I'd walk in, there'd be 5 people playing. I mean, there would be 4 or 5 people playing, but there were 4 or 5 people in the crowd. And there were the bands that I would see that would be playing like they were playing to 50,000 people. And there'd be bands that are like, fuck this, sorry, excuse my language, but they'd be like, forget this, I'm not, like, this is a joke. And they, you know, they would show it on their shoulders, they'd be angry, or they'd half butt it, you know, they would not go full out. And I'm like, why would I want to do anything with this band? And I was done. And I remember walking into the gig one night and seeing this blonde girl up on stage. There's probably 4 people in there, and she was belting out these songs. She had a set of pipes on her and her band, and she was singing like there was no tomorrow. And I go up to her, and this is not the first time people said this to me when I went. I'm like, hey, I'm like, you know, what's you're great. Like, what's your deal? Where, you know, do you have a demo out? Oh yeah, well here's my website, and Carl, go and check it out. I'm like, well, you know, I like know a little more, like, and she's like, well, and then I drop her a business card. She's like, oh my God, okay, let me tell you. Found out Scott Weiland from Stone Temple Pilots was recording her and trying to put her out. So at one point, I'm listening to it at an SIR, which is like a rental. I'm sure some of you may know or may not. It's a rental, but they rent gear. They also have stages where, you know, big bands would rehearse before they go out on the road. So I'm sitting there with Scott Weiland and like 10 A&R guys I know from all the major labels watching her. And that's why she was there. Not only because Scott would help her, but when she was out playing for 4 people, she was out there like she wanted it. So I would say, again, coming back to it, when you're out, even if you're going to a coffee shop playing for 2 people, you don't know who those 2 people are.
Yeah.
You don't. They may look like me at 24, where I look like I was, you know, 18, and I was just some kid. I mean, I still dress like, you know, but I mean, you know what I mean? So I'm not wearing there in a suit and tie. Go ahead. Yeah.
You talk about hustling these smaller gigs and beginning to really build your fan base. If you're more like a hard rock metal band where you can't do coffee shops, what would you call like the do-it-yourself cover thing?
You know what? I worked with a couple, you know, metal bands and hard bands. Beartooth being one of them. I helped sign over to Red Bull Records, and you know, a lot of these guys go and play house parties. They get their friends.
What was the name of that band?
Beartooth.
Beartooth?
Yeah, Beartooth. You know, you play house parties. You go to a warehouse, and when you're in that crew, you'll find even in LA, I have musicians that are like, I just got to LA. I'm like, go play out. It's a small world.
How
It's a
many
very-
have been to a house party? And the king of house parties just walked in. But to your point, go ahead.
You know what, and actually, metal, if that's the kind of band, globally is the biggest genre out there, and they have the most die-hard fans, so, I mean, it's a little encouragement for you there, you know,
Yeah.
it seems
Play
rich,
out
but
in
it's not.
the Netherlands.
Yeah, like I have a really good friend in a band called Sepultura, you know, and that little band, and you know, overseas, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's huge
Huge
over.
stadiums.
So maybe that's a thing, you know. Honestly, if you had the economic means or something, you take it outside of the U.S.
But-
and you go where.
You build. I mean, you know, now you're online. You post it up on YouTube. You can get the data.
Yeah,
and
you'll
you
know
go,
where it found.
all right, you know, maybe we have 5,000 people streaming out of Russia. You know, we have a friend in the band. He's like, we went there. They treated us like gold. Granted, it was tough touring, but you can go out there and tour. I mean, you know, it's you find those things.
Hang on, Eric, you want to take her over here first? Go ahead.
I just had a quick question for Austin. Do you book corporate gigs, private parties, house concerts?
Yes, we do. There's 2 agents in our Nashville office who, that is their gig. They handle all this. So, I mean, it's everything for, you know, such and such company wants to throw a cocktail party for 50 of their guests, and they have a budget of $10,000. Who can you provide to, you know, pick the richest, wealthiest people?
$500,000 to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, we have artists that literally range from $500 that will come play, you know, your bar mitzvah
Yeah.
wedding reception to, you know, acts that run $3-4 million for a private engagement. So there is a world
So
within
hang on
that.
one second, I put up here an artist by the name of Mike Dawes. Has anybody heard of him? You might want to check it out. I met him through a client that I've worked with for about 30 years that we won't name, but he's a great guitarist. And he said to me, you know, you need to check this guy out, from slap to whatever. Metallica loves this guy. And so he did a video playing a Metallica song that is millions into the stratosphere. And Mike is really learning how to take advantage of all of these situations you're talking about. It hit him pretty hard as to what to do with this and how to get out there. So he's touring with different bands as their guitarist, and he's asking if he can also be their opening act.
Yeah.
So you see him, and then you see him in the band. Then we leverage the crap out of it, and again, no skin in the game, we just do it because we like him. Help set up press, and then put him in touch with Duotone and other retailer situations that will sponsor clinics with him. So you might look into that opportunity within band members within a band. Eric?
I had a question for us.
Again.
All these, I have a club in Seattle. We got
Oh,
all
I
these
know.
bands
I remember
coming,
listening to you teach.
brand new bands, and their biggest ask is, we can't get hooked up with an agent.
Mhm.
You guys are the hottest commodities on the street. And so I was wondering if you could share, even with a smaller agency, what would be 3 or 4 points of critical criteria a band should approach you with for you to consider taking on?
I'm sure it's going to affect all of you.
Well, this, I guess, would have to be just my personal opinion, because there isn't, you know, there isn't like a list of things that they hand out when you get hired at our company. But for me, if you had to list 4 things, it's coachability and music, music, music. If I'm not passionate about the music, and you don't want to listen to what I have to say and come to me wanting my expertise but don't want to listen to it, I can't work with you, period. And so I'm one person, and other people might see other things. You know, I always hear, well, I just saw the star quality in this act or this band, and so I signed them. But, you know, 9 times out of 10, you also run into a situation where you go ahead and sign them, and it turns out you do not want to be working with that person. Because at the end of the day, this is a working relationship. Like, I just happen to be very close with my artists, and, you know, we hang out, you know, we have the personal relationships as friends and mentors and things like that. But at the end of the day, like, they have hired me and paid me a commission to do a very specific job, and what I just ask of them is to trust me in that process. And then when I was actually getting my MBA here, that was the biggest topic during our entrepreneurship classes, was trust. If there is no trust, there is no deal, and it's never going to happen. If you don't trust your art, it's never going to happen. And if you don't trust the people around you that you hire, they're not going to work for you in the way that you want to happen. So, yeah. So at the end of the day, if I just don't believe in the music and we can't trust each other, it's just not going to happen. And I say coachability just because oftentimes I'm talking to, you know, kids, you know, people in their 20s that come out and they go, I got 20 million streams on Spotify. Why aren't I doing 200 dates? And it goes, you know, and you have to educate them. Well, what does that really mean? And how can we do this smart where you come out as a success? Because the last thing I want to do or anyone up here wants to do is put your client in a position to fail. Because if they fail, you fail. And when artists are failing, they're not gonna throw up their hands and quit. They're gonna start looking at the people around them and start cutting cords very quick, so.
Other questions? Up there.
So if you are a hobbyist and you're got a whole can full of music that you put together and you want to get it, and you're planning on putting it on YouTube or something like that, what's the quickest way to protect it? So that if somebody else grabs up one of your items and suddenly it's selling millions, but you wrote it, you know it's yours.
Call a lawyer.
Call this guy right here.
How do you defend it?
You know what you should do is you should register yourself with a performing rights organization,
That's step
CSAC,
one for
ASCAP,
sure.
BMI.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you don't want to do that, all you
Well-
want to do is protect it real quick.
One, that's the quickest way to protect it.
That's how you protect it.
That's how you protect
That's
it.
that's
It's like filing a copyright registration
Well, it
only.
doesn't work to take and put it in an envelope,
No.
and mail it yourself.
Don't do that.
yeah. You don't need
You
to.
just wasted a stamp.
Yeah, because at this point, if you recorded it and you put it up online somewhere, you have a date stamp. Or if you recorded in Pro Tools, depending on how you record it, you can always go back and it's like you're digital now. You're date stamped. Someone says, "Oh, I recorded that." You go, "Here are the Pro Tools sessions. It was recorded on this date. When was your recorded?" "Oh, it was after."
But I still think a society, like your
Yeah,
affiliation, like
you
you're talking
register
about.
with the Performing Rights Organization. It gives you all your address, your phone number. You make sure you put all those songs
It's
in
pretty easy to do
timing.
now.
It's very easy, and
It's always been easy to do.
yeah, it's very, and that's the
Yeah,
best way.
First
to
time
do
I
it.
tried it was like mail,
Yeah, it's-
kind of stuff.
It takes a minute. It takes a minute. I mean,
Yeah.
it's once you do it once, and then registering new songs is like it just made. The only problem you'll have is misspelling, titles, and you're like, oh, now I gotta call them and have them change it or.
And to that end, where he's talking about the code stamps and the time stamps, et cetera, there's 4 or 5 cases being mitigated right now, and those associations and affiliations are actually helping to pick up that legal bill and to help negotiate through who did what and what really is right. You had a question?
So I was just wondering more about those organizations, like, is it like a website you just
Yeah.
fill out like forms and upload files and?
Yeah, you can for the PROs. Yeah, you can go to ASCAP.com, BMI.com. If you type in BMI in Google, it'll pull up body mass index. Totally different.
Right.
It's probably worth explaining, out of the 3 main PROs, like, which are probably the best ones to go with early on.
Right.
Because CSAC is more selective and
Right.
Yeah.
And so depends on who you talk to. Some publishers will say, well, BMI gives me a better payout than ASCAP. And CSAC is a lot smaller, and they like to say, we're more of a boutique performing rights organization where we'll pay you out more, and you can register your performances and how many people you perform for, and they'll pay you out on your actual, I played at Red Rocks, or I played at the Top Hat. And they'll go, okay, we'll give you $1 or whatever, you know what I mean? I know when I ran West Coast Creative for Horry Pro Music Publishing, which is a big Nashville-based
Yeah.
publisher, and they have 5 #1 hits a year or something like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
2 to 10, depends. And we go CSAC all the time. It's a very strong country music PRO. But they're based in New York, Nashville, LA. So it just depends on if you know anyone over there, and if you don't, I would say maybe look at the artists associated and just you can just throw a dart at it.
Are you part of the UMEM program?
No, media arts.
Okay, right here on this campus, there's a vast wealth of knowledge and information, and some of this is very basic, but I know it seems like, what's a PRO? I'm sure I can hear it now, what people are asking, so. I would, Mike, is he here? Oh, good, he's not. So we'll just go ahead and do this. What's that? So, Tom Webster, who's sitting here, Mike Morelli, et cetera, they can help you, they can steer you in the right directions to learn this information. It's not tough, so just encourage you to do that. This campus is blessed with that. We have a guest speaker here, Mike Garcia, who is from California. And I'm sure he can talk a little bit to that too, get some of the same questions and can provide some of that same information. Who else had a question here? Let's go with you.
I
And we'll come
have
to you,
like,
Josh.
I see that booking agents are the thing that everybody wants because booking is so frustrating and it zaps the life out of artists. It's so hard. How do you break out of the chicken or egg cycle of people not even opening your email because they've never heard of you, or I mean, how do you get into that good old boy network of people recommending and the relationships that you talk about that are so important?
Again, for me, I think it all comes down to the music, but I think at the same time, in an earlier part of your career, just that you have to hustle and network just as much as you're networking, or just as much as you're creating your art. New singer-songwriters, when they come to Nashville, for example, you can't just go play writers' rounds every night and hope that publishers discover you, or that agents discover you, or record labels, or whomever. Like, you need to go up and do your round, and then immediately get off that and start handing out cards, talking to everyone. As you make friends, these artists and songwriter circles are so tight that the more that you're making friends, other people are talking about you, the more that people outside of just the singer-songwriter world are gonna hear about you. So I encourage a lot of my younger artists, if I discover them, say like in Georgia, and they're having good club business down there, it's not gonna matter at the end of the day if I can't get anyone in Nashville to know who they are. If no one in Nashville knows who you are, you're gonna be in this one spot for, you're gonna be the bar band in Athens, Georgia. So you have to make those attempts where you can. And if it's just staying within your community, it's like going out and shaking hands. If there's the 4 people in the coffee shop, hey, thanks for listening to my music, here's my information, and just,
I want to ask Victoria,
Yeah.
what's your advice on that?
I mean, there's so many non-traditional ways that you can get out in front of unique audiences and perform. For instance, I'm on the board for Musicians on Call. It's a charity where musicians play for, really sick patients who can't get out of the hospital. They've just aligned with a whole, 4 or 5 new hospitals across the country. They're really looking for emerging artists to play. But those events kind of lead to bigger things, so they have these big charity events where they'll ask musicians like you guys to play, and you're getting in front of some heavy hitters there, some tastemakers.
So if you have the talent.
Well, I did have a quick follow-up, which is there any value to physically traveling to these, I love living in the country, but I would tolerate the city for a few days to knock on some doors and have some meetings. Is there value to that?
I struggle. But bands always ask me about South by Southwest, right? And do you guys know what that is? I mean, it's become nuts now. But, back in the day, it was really for A&R guys to discover these bands. And it was much smaller. You didn't have Apple and Kanye West playing. It was really about discovering bands. Now it's very commercialized. There's a lot of brand partnerships. It's gotten very cluttered. So bands always ask me, should I route myself, my entire band, go to South by? And you know what I mostly say? I say it's not worth it because it's hard to really break through that clutter. So unless you have a fan base around there or something popping off, or you got aligned with a brand that's really going to drive people to that show, it might not be worth it. On the other side of that is, my team is responsible for going out and brokering these deals with talent agents, for the bigger festivals. So, we work with Bonnaroo and we work with Summerfest. In 2016, we booked a kid named Ron Gallo from New York. He's like this indie rock dude, right? We put him on a stage. There happened to be some record labels there. The next month, he got signed by New West Records. So, it's one, looking at non-traditional avenues, but being smart about it, about the economics behind it, and what really makes sense. Does that kind of help a little
I
bit?
mean, I guess I was thinking narrower than that, like buy a plane ticket to LA and like physically walk into offices and try to see.
No.
I think that's a hard no.
Yeah.
I really don't.
I do too.
You know,
Yeah, yeah.
Again, you're better off like just playing regionally or
Build
locally.
your, yeah, build your story
following,
there.
and-
Let's take Josh.
Well, I had another question on some advice. Brooke and I both play in Faith's Fortune. We're part of the showcase tomorrow for the Montana Music Summit. And we've been having some difficulty as a young artist building the regional fan base. Outside of Missoula, we're trying to contact other areas of Montana, Idaho, Washington. Do you have any advice to break through the clutter and get on people's radar?
What kind of music is it?
Hard rock is the easiest way. That's right.
You know, I don't know the demographic, and here, you know, I would do some research and find out where your genre fits in. Maybe, and again, I don't know, maybe there's somewhere locally where there's one spot that's like the rock metal place, and I would just go hang out and meet the bands and jump on maybe a tour with them. Or, you know, maybe there's nowhere around here. Maybe the majority demographic is country and folk and pop or hip hop. I don't, you know what I mean? Then it might be worth exploring outside of your 10, 20, 50, 100 mile radius to try and book a show one night in 1 month in that place where they have that music that fits.
There's also a couple of resources you can use. I mean, Reverb Nation has something called Gig Finder, where you can kind of look at different venues, the type of genres they usually book, you know, the capacity, all that stuff. There's also a company called Indie on the Move.
Just about to
Yeah,
say
where-
that. I use that stuff.
Yeah, you use that stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
What's
So
it called again?
Indie on the Move.
How many of you have heard of that? Really check it out.
So that's a good resource for you too. And another great idea, I think you were just touching on it, is do your research, find a band that's a little bigger than you, that maybe they can draw a 200 cap room, and just be like, hey, listen, I'll open for you. This is how we're gonna promote you guys, and kind of, you know, almost create a package for a promoter. Promoters love that stuff at the smaller venues. If you can come with a fleshed out, you know, package for a night or something, and you know, you're linking up with a band that's got a little bit bigger of a draw than you, I mean, you should see some success there.
We've been having some trouble in just breaking through the clutter and getting noticed, like sending out press releases, demos, and album links and whatnot to even places like Bozeman or Spokane, surrounding areas. I feel like we've largely got ignored so far over maybe the 100 hours that we put in promoting this year. And is there any specific advice you can give on breaking through the clutter? Well, obviously hard work and using these tools and resources.
I would just say stay at it, because.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, like and of course my aspect's a little different,
Just
but
speak up just a
there's like, because I pitch to film and TV and supervisors, and I think we're all the same way, where there's so many bands coming at music supervisors or A&R guys or booking agents or publicity or just anyone in the industry. That stuff that I want to listen to, I don't have time to listen to, even though I want to. And my job is not to listen to music other than what I'm working, paid to work. So I would say continually remind these people you're there, because sometimes even with me, with my artists, hey man, like, oh yeah, okay, sorry, I'm coming right back at you. And these people that I work with, you know, remind them. It's like any job. Hey, I sent you a resume. I'm just wondering if I can get in and maybe like just swing by and talk to you.
So you've done your research, and like, you know, the clubs that have like leaning like heavy metal nights and rock nights and that kind of stuff. You have and you're just getting no feedback at all, or what are they saying to you?
We're getting lukewarm from the venues, and we're not having so much problem with them as getting radio stations to respond, newspapers to respond. We're sending our people out to get reviews, and in a professional manner. We're both educated and have degrees and whatnot, so we're not sending out a bad product or a poorly written press release or email. We're just mainly getting ignored for the review section.
Do you know anyone that does have relationships with those people? Like other bands that are local bands that are getting played on Bozeman radio that can maybe, you know, be the ones that poke them in the ribs and say, hey, there's this band in Missoula that you really do need to check out. That's an example.
It's networking for sure.
Because even if, you know, a lot of times it's hard for a radio, this is just my experience, and more so because I work with radio acts, although they start as indie acts. It's hard for a radio station to play an act earlier in their career when they're not in town playing, because it's just like, here's some music, but I don't have anything else to talk about. So if it's Bozeman, like, do you have a relationship with the filling station there, or Emerson Theater, or whoever it is that's playing metal nights, and figuring out how to get in there? And maybe it's an economics of scale issue, like, hey, if you're a first time acting here, like, you just gotta be ready to take a $0 guarantee versus the door, or we're just gonna pay you, 2 cases of Coors Light tonight, and you're opening up for, Jim Bob and the Booger Bottom Boys. It's like, you have to look at, there's real ones, man. That's, and just, there's something to be said in an investment, and there's nothing that anyone out here or over here that, as an artist or someone working in the industry or someone that wants to, that the biggest investment you can make is your time. And time costs money, and if it's just a matter of figuring out a way to just get a foot in and playing a show in these markets, and then when you're there, beforehand you're reaching out and saying, I want to talk to the radio station and say, hey, we're playing a show tonight, could you please come down? And maybe that's how you get them to pay attention. And if it doesn't work, then shame on them for not supporting what they should be doing.
Speaking of time, we're out of it. These are really short sessions, so I want to thank you, first of all, for being so attentive and very good questions. Really, really appreciate you being on top of it. Guys, you're the best. Thank you for being part of this.
You're the best.
You're the best. How can we do that? You're the best.